The ambulance pulled away from the Hendricks farm at dawn, lights spinning red across the soybean fields. Margaret Voss watched from her kitchen window, coffee mug steady in her weathered hands, while 27 guinea fowl scratched and muttered in the run behind her barn. By noon, everyone in Jasper County would know Lyme disease had put another farmer in the hospital. By evening, they'd remember who they'd laughed at 3 years ago when she'd chosen guineas over chickens. 3 years earlier, Margaret had driven to the poultry auction in Carthage, Missouri, with a list: 12 laying hens, good producers, preferably Rhode Island Reds. Her husband Dale had died the previous winter, heart attack in the north pasture, quick and cruel, and she was running the 70 acres alone now. Chickens made sense. Eggs to sell, meat if needed, straightforward husbandry. But then she'd seen them. A flock of pearl guinea fowl, their spotted feathers catching light like river stones, their alert, prehistoric heads turning in unison to track a fly across the barn rafters. The auctioneer was already midway through the lot. $20. Do I hear 25? These are fine tick eaters, folks, proven flock from the Osgood place. Margaret's hand went up. 25 to the lady. Do I hear 30? Silence. Then someone behind her. What'd she want with those noisy bastards? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Margaret knew the voice. Carl Brenner, who farmed 1,000 acres of corn and spoke at every county meeting like God handed him talking points personally. Margaret, you sure? The auctioneer asked. They're loud. Real loud. I'm sure. 30. Do I hear 30? No one bid. Carl's voice carried. She's finally lost it. Dale would've. She turned around then, looked him full in the face. Dale would've what? Dale was gone. She was here. Going once, the auctioneer said, grateful. Sold. She loaded 20 guineas into cages in her truck bed. They shrieked the whole drive home, a sound like rusty machinery having opinions. Her daughter, and called before she'd even finished unloading. Mom, Carol Brenner just texted me. She said you bought guinea fowl. That's right. Instead of chickens. Yes. A pause, heavy with the particular concern of adult children who think their parents are making dangerous decisions. And lived in Springfield now, worked at the hospital, visited twice a month with her jaw already set for arguments. Mom, those things are impossible. They're wild. They scream constantly. Why would they eat ticks? So do chickens. Not like guineas do. This is about money, isn't it? You're trying to save money on chickens. Margaret watched the birds explore their new run, already patrolling the fence line with alert efficiency. This is about doing what makes sense. Nothing about this makes sense. After and hung up, Margaret stood in the yard until the spring sun dropped behind the tree line. Her grandmother had kept guineas in the 1940s, back when people still understood integrated pest management without calling it that. Better than any chemical, her grandmother used to say, and they'll tell you when trouble's coming. At the feed store the next week, the clerk, young Travis Morton, smiled like he was humoring someone confused. Margaret, you need layer feed? Game bird feed. High protein. For the guineas? That's right. My dad said. He stopped. Go on. He said guineas are more trouble than they're worth. That you'll be back for chickens by June. We'll see. But everywhere she went that spring, the comments followed. At church, heard those birds screaming from the road. Must keep you up nights. At the co-op, Margaret's got herself a flock of dinosaurs. At the diner, someone should check on her. Make sure she's eating right. Her son-in-law, Paul, was more direct when he came to help fix the barn door in May. Mom's worried. We both are. This guinea thing, and you're out here alone. And I'm fine, Paul. Are you? Because from the outside, it looks like you're making things harder than they need to be. From the outside, maybe. He didn't understand. None of them did. The guineas ranged across her 70 acres every day, working in coordinated groups, eating everything that crawled. Ticks, grasshoppers, beetles, spiders. She'd found 3 ticks on herself the previous summer. This year, none. The birds roost in the barn at night, their presence a strange comfort. By July, her neighbors started noticing the ticks, started finding them on their kids, their dogs, embedded and swelling. Lyme disease showed up in the county health report. 3 cases, then 7, then 15. Margaret's field stayed clean. Carl Brenner stopped her at the grain elevator in August. You having tick problems? No. We're covered with them. Never seen it this bad. She said nothing. Those guinea fowl of yours. They actually work. They work. His face tightened. Well, good for you. But he didn't buy guineas. None of them did. Too noisy. Too wild. Too much admission that Margaret Voss, the widow they'd all pitied, might know something they didn't. The tick population exploded over the next 2 years. The county extension office sent warnings. Veterinarians reported dogs with Lyme disease. The Hendricks boy, 14 years old, missed a month of school. Fever, joint pain, the bullseye rash unmistakable. Margaret's guineas multiplied. She sold hatching eggs, then juvenile birds. A few farmers bought them, the ones who were desperate or humble or smart enough to recognize what was obvious. Then came the spring when adult humans started falling. The Hendricks ambulance wasn't the first. Tom Hendricks was the third farmer hospitalized that month with late-stage Lyme disease, the kind that got into your heart, your nervous system, turned weeks of ignored symptoms into something that required 4 antibiotics and cardiac monitoring. Before Tom, it was Sarah Chun from the organic vegetable farm. Before Sarah, it was old Martin Wells, who'd been bitten so many times the doctors said his immune system had become a battlefield. Margaret stood in her field that morning, watching her guineas work. 43 birds now, ranging in age from 3 years to 3 months. They moved like a small army on patrol, spread out, communicating with their one-note calls, heads down and focused. A guinea could eat 100 ticks in a day. 43 guineas, over the course of a season, could clear 70 acres down to almost nothing. Her phone rang, and voice tight. Mom, Paul just told me about Tom Hendricks. I saw the ambulance. He's in ICU. They think the bacteria reached his heart. That's terrible. Mom. A pause. People are scared. Really scared. And I heard someone at the hospital say, she stopped. What? That you warned people. 3 years ago. That you knew this was coming. I didn't know. I just prepared. Same thing. No, it's not. But maybe it was. Margaret had watched the land change over 50 years of farming. Warmer winters, wetter springs, the gradual march of southern species northward. She'd seen the first wave of black-lead ticks show up 10 years ago, sparse at first, then more numerous. She'd read the extension bulletins, the climate reports. She'd known what was building, even if she couldn't have predicted the exact timing. The guineas had been preparation, not prophecy. That afternoon, she had her first visitor. Rick Salter, who farmed the property east of hers, standing in her driveway hat in hand. Margaret, got a minute? She was filling water troughs. Sure. I was hoping you might sell me some birds. Guineas. However many you can spare. You called them rat chickens last summer. His neck went red. I did. I was wrong. He said they sounded like car alarms having a nervous breakdown. That too. I'm sorry. She studied him. Saw genuine worry. The kind that came when your family was at risk and pride was suddenly a luxury you couldn't afford. I've got 12 juveniles ready to go. $100 for the lot. That's more than fair. Thank you. Rick, they won't fix things overnight. Takes months for them to really clear the land. I know, but we found 5 ticks on my daughter last week. She's 7. I'll do whatever it takes. By the end of the week, Margaret had a waiting list. Not just neighbors anymore. Farmers from 3 counties over, calling after hearing from friends, from veterinarians, from the county health department that had finally started recommending integrated pest management. Carl Brenner showed up on a Tuesday. Margaret was in the garden when his truck pulled up. She didn't stop weeding, just waited. Margaret, Carl. He stood there, a big man made somehow smaller by the moment. I need to buy birds. All sold out. Won't have more until the fall hatch. Fall's too late. We've got, his voice cracked slightly. My wife found a tick on our grandson. He's 4. We're terrified. Margaret sat back on her heels, dirt under her fingernails. Remembered all the comments, the laughter, the way he'd invoked Dale's name like a weapon. Remembered being the subject of pity and mockery for 3 years. I can put you on the list, she said. Please. There's 20 people ahead of you. I'll pay double, triple. It's a list, Carl. First come, first served. His face worked through something. Anger, shame, desperation. Finally, I'm sorry. For what I said. All of it. You were right. I should have listened. Yes. That all you got to say? What else is there? He left. Margaret went back to weeding. But that evening, she called him. Carl, I've got 3 young birds that aren't quite ready to sell, but they're old enough. You can have them for standard price. Start there, see how they do. Silence on the line. Then, why would you do that? Because your grandson is 4. And because being right doesn't mean being cruel. He came at sunrise to pick them up, brought cash and a vegetable basket from his wife. Margaret helped him load the birds, showed him how to handle them, explained the basics of guineas, how they needed to be trained to return to roost, how they worked in groups, how they patrol property boundaries. They're not chickens, she said. They think different. You have to work with that. I'll learn. The county extension agent came the following week, a young woman named Dr. Emily Rhodes, clipboard in hand, eyes bright with the intensity of someone who'd finally found a solution in a sea of problems. Ms. Voss, I'd like to document your methods. We're developing a county-wide integrated pest management initiative, and you're our primary case study. Margaret was cleaning the guinea coop, ammonia sharp in the warm air. Not much to document. I raise guineas. They eat ticks. That's it. But you've been doing it for 3 years. Through the entire emergence of the tick problem, your timing was lucky. Was it? Margaret looked at her. My grandmother kept guineas. I listened to what she knew. That's not luck. That's just memory. The interview took 2 hours. Dr. Rhodes measured everything. Tick counts in Margaret's fields versus neighboring properties, disease incidents, guinea fowl ranging patterns. The data was stark. Margaret's land had 97% fewer black-legged ticks than properties without guineas. This is remarkable, Dr. Rhodes said. Do you understand how significant this is? You've essentially created a model for sustainable tick management without chemicals. I created a flock of birds. They did the rest. But the word spread faster than ticks ever could. The local paper ran a story. Widows' crazy birds prove life-saving in tick crisis. Then the agricultural press picked it up. Then the state health department. Margaret's phone rang constantly. Journalists, farmers, researchers, biosecurity officials. And came home on a Saturday, let herself in, found Margaret at the kitchen table sorting hatching eggs. Mom, you're famous. I'm busy. Everyone's talking about you. Paul's friends from the hospital, people at work, even the governor's office called about agricultural innovation grants. Don't want a grant. Mom, Anne. Margaret looked up. I didn't do this for attention. I did it because it was right. Because the land was telling me something, and I listened. That's all. And sat down across from her. I'm sorry. For saying you'd lost it. For not understanding. You were worried. That's different than being wrong. Is it? Margaret smiled, just slightly. Sometimes. The community meeting happened in September, held in the county fairgrounds exhibition hall because the usual meeting room couldn't hold the crowd. 217 people showed up. Farmers, homeowners, county officials, health department representatives, the press. Margaret sat in the back row until Dr. Rhodes physically came to get her. You need to be on the panel. I'm not a speaker. You're the reason we're here. The panel included the county health director, the extension office supervisor, a veterinarian, and a livestock specialist from the state agricultural college. And Margaret, sitting at the end, feeling like she'd been dressed up for someone else's play. The health director spoke first, showing slides of tick population data, disease incidents, the projected crisis if current trends continued. Then the veterinarian discussed livestock protection. Then Dr. Rhodes presented Margaret's farm as a case study, the before and after, the measurable impact, the scalability of the model. Then they turned to Margaret. Ms. Voss, can you explain your decision-making process? What made you choose guinea fowl 3 years ago? Margaret looked at the crowd. Saw Carl Brenner in the third row. Saw Rick Salter with his wife. Saw Travis Morton from the feed store, now sitting with a notebook like a student. Saw faces she'd known for 50 years, wearing expressions that range from respect to embarrassment to genuine curiosity. I listened, she said. My grandmother kept guineas. She told me what they could do. I saw the ticks increasing. I put those two things together. But others saw the ticks too. Why didn't they? Because I'm old enough to remember what we did before chemicals. Before we decided we could control nature with money and equipment. She paused. And because when you're a widow running a farm alone, you learn to trust yourself instead of waiting for permission. Someone started clapping. Then others. Margaret felt her face heat, uncomfortable with the attention but holding steady because that's what you did. The questions came then, practical and urgent. Where to buy guineas? How many per acre? What about noise complaints? Could they live with chickens? How long until the land cleared? Margaret answered each one, her voice growing stronger. This she knew. This was just farming. After the meeting, a line formed, people wanting private consultations, phone numbers, hatching egg reservations. Margaret worked through them with patient efficiency, writing names and numbers in her worn notebook, explaining that she'd do her best, but there were only so many birds and so many hours. Carl Brenner waited until the end. When it was finally his turn, he didn't say anything at first, just stood there, a big man in work clothes, looking tired. "Those 3 birds he sold me," he finally said. "They're working. We're seeing fewer ticks already. Good. I was thinking, when you have your fall hatch, I'd like to buy a dozen more. Pay whatever you need. Standard price. And you're on the list." "Fair enough." He shifted his weight. "Margaret, I need to say something. You already apologized, Carl. Not properly. Not publicly." He raised his voice slightly, so the remaining people could hear. 3 years ago, I mocked Margaret Voss for buying Guinea Fowl. Called her crazy. Made jokes at her expense. I was wrong. She was right. She saved lives by being right. I just wanted everyone to know that. The room went quiet. Margaret felt something shift, not vindication exactly, but acknowledgement. The settling of a debt. "Thank you, Carl," she said quietly. "That means something." By October, Margaret had contracts for 300 juvenile guineas, more than she could possibly raise alone, and quit her hospital job, moved back home, started managing the business side. They converted the old dairy barn into a proper Guinea Fowl operation, hired Travis Morton part-time to help with daily management. The tick crisis didn't disappear overnight. Lyme disease cases still occurred, especially in areas where Guinea fowl hadn't yet been established. But the trajectory changed. Countywide, tick populations began a measurable decline. Neighboring counties started their own integrated management programs. The State Agricultural College added a Guinea fowl husbandry course. Margaret's farm became a teaching site. She ran monthly workshops, walking farmers through her fields, showing them the management practices that made guineas work, the roosting training, the ranging patterns, the patience required. She didn't charge for the education. The birds paid for themselves. One evening in late November, after the last workshop of the season, Margaret stood by the guinea coop watching the flock settle in for the night. 68 birds now, their pearl-spotted feathers catching the last light, their voices finally quieting into soft chirps and murmurs, and came out carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Mom," the university called again. "They want to do a documentary." "Tell them no." "Mom." And, "I'm not interesting. The birds are interesting. The land is interesting. The fact that old knowledge still works, that's interesting. Me? I'm just someone who paid attention." And smiled, handed her a mug. "You're more than that." "Maybe. But I'm also just a farmer. And farmers work. We don't spend time being celebrated for it." They stood together in the cooling air, drinking coffee while the guineas settled. Across the fields, lights were coming on in farmhouses where other guinea flocks were roosting, where other farmers were learning to listen to the land, where the old ways were becoming new again, not because someone had argued or preached, but because someone had simply done the work and let the results speak. Margaret Voss had been mocked for 3 years, had been called crazy, pitted, dismissed, had watched her judgment questioned and her choices ridiculed. But she'd also watched Tom Hendricks come home from the hospital, watched Sarah Chin's symptoms resolve, watched Carl Brenner's grandson play outside without fear. The vindication wasn't in the apologies or the attention. It was in the land itself, cleaner, safer, more balanced than it had been in a decade. It was in the guineas, doing the work they'd been bred to do for centuries. It was in the farmers who'd finally learned to listen, and in the knowledge that kept flowing forward because someone had been stubborn enough to remember. Tomorrow, 3 new farmers were coming to buy birds. The work continued. The land provided. And Margaret, as always, would be there at dawn, proceeding forward with the steady confidence of someone who'd never needed validation. Just time for the truth to prove itself. The guineas called goodnight one last time. Margaret Voss, calloused hands wrapped around warm coffee, smiled into the gathering dark.